So recently, FCC Chairman Ajit Pai announced proposed changes to how the organization regulates internet service providers. In particular, Pai is proposing rolling back 2015 Obama-era regulation that changed ISPs' regulatory status from Title I information services providers to Title II telecommunications providers. And now this really increased regulatory burden on ISPs and it enforced kind of a standard of net neutrality, whereby ISPs had to treat all internet traffic equally. They couldn't charge more to deliver certain traffic, they couldn't promote their own services over those of another content provider, but Pai wants to roll this back and really reduce the burden on ISPs.
The idea that internet service providers are information providers is ridiculous. The argument behind this is to say that they provide lots of services like email and data storage, but no one believes that you're signing up for Comcast because you need email or data storage. You're getting the internet. And because of that, I think what you're going to see is a lot of increased prices in most markets as these service providers are not restricted from charging you more for certain types of traffic. And in the end, I think it's really going to hurt competition in the tech space because all of these Bay Area companies depend on a free and open internet to get off the ground.
While I think you're right about ISPs definitely not being media companies, I think that hysterical outrage I'm seeing on places like my Facebook newsfeed about these changes and the end of net neutrality and the impact it could have on everyday internet customers is absolutely wrong. The first thing I would say is that these rules were only introduced in 2015. So if you look back on your internet experience pre-2015 and see that you were being throttled for half of the sites that you visit, you couldn't get Netflix, you couldn't get all these things that you like, and since then you've been gifted this open internet nirvana, then yes, net neutrality has been great for you and you should absolutely support keeping it. But if not much has changed, which I wager is probably the case most people are watching, I think you have to ask yourself, how much of a problem did these 2015 rules actually solve?
Adam, your argument is completely disingenuous. The 2015 rules were put into place because service providers were doing things like supporting their own content above others, throttling certain types of sites. And through all this, we said, actually, they're violating the spirit that already existed, which is that providers should be free and open. And because of that, we put these regulations in place, and so we wouldn't expect anything to change because we were just trying to maintain the status quo.
Okay, point taken. But I have a number of other arguments that I'm going to roll through now. So the first one is that ISPs are still going to be regulated and be held accountable for anti-competitive behavior. The FTC and the Justice Department can still look into any antitrust violations ISPs are involved in. If ISPs all band together and say, let's charge way more for Netflix, say, that would be a bog-standard antitrust case and they could be held accountable. So this idea that they're just going to be able to run wild and do whatever they want to consumers is utterly false.
Agreed. However, by reclassifying these providers, I do think you will see more of this collusion than you're seeing today, and it is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on that will actually be very hard to catch and to prosecute.
Well, I think collusion is going to be difficult, and also monopoly behavior is going to be difficult, because I think for most customers, there are actually a number of ISPs available where they live. The FCC does this thing called the Internet Access Services Report, where they look by census block to see how many internet providers are reaching a certain level of internet speed. And you see that there's actually a lot of choice in the marketplace. So I think even if one ISP tried to take advantage of the end of net neutrality or various changes to their pricing, it'll be difficult for them to gain market share.
Yes, and for this, I'll go back to a point from our review of Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1. And he talked about companies that tell you that they're not monopolies, that they play up their amount of competition, are usually monopolies. And all of these internet service providers are in some ways a monopoly. They have a grasp on the region that they happen to be in. There's very little competition. And this idea that there are lots of service providers, I think is just a smokescreen to try to make up for the fact that there's no competition at all.
If you're going to bring Peter Thiel into this, I would like to return to sort of his libertarian roots and say that when you regulate companies like a monopoly, you kind of end up creating a monopoly. And I think we have to be really careful here to make sure that the amount of regulation we put on ISPs doesn't stop startups from entering the industry. If you're a startup looking to provide internet to people, and you see the ISPs are regulated like these Title II telecommunication services, what motivation is there really for you to build your product? You're never going to be able to extract significant profits. You're going to be under a constant regulatory scrutiny from the FCC. And I think we're going to be in danger of seeing things like broadband investment, new entrants in the marketplace going backwards as a result of these rules.
Regulation is always a double-edged sword. Someone benefits and someone is harmed by each piece of regulation we pass. But in this case, I would be much more comfortable regulating the creation of new ISP startups than I would be regulating the creation of all tech startups. And all of the non-ISP startups will be affected by these regulations because they're not ever able to get their sites off the ground when they've been throttled or they've been restricted by a service provider you may have.
Well, I think people are going to be able to get their sites off the ground because I don't think any ISP is going to have the market power to be able to say, we're not going to deliver a particular site to you. But I do think it's worth noting that the majority of internet users spend the majority of their time on a pretty small group of sites. And I do think there is a market for a user, particularly a lower income internet user potentially, who would want to pay a lower price per month for internet and only get a smaller subset of the sites they actually visit. Maybe get a service where they're just getting like Netflix, Facebook, Google products, whatever they actually use, and only pay a small price per month. And if the alternative for that customer is just not being able to afford internet entirely, then I think you actually create value for them by allowing ISPs to diversify their offerings.
I agree if the argument is no internet versus a very small subset that you can pay for, then having something is better than nothing. However, I think that group of people, even people, let's say, in the poverty line range, that group is pretty small in the United States. I think what you're actually going to see is people today who get full internet, let's say paying an average of $60 a month, are now going to find that costs $120 a month. I think this will have a pretty negative effect, at least in the United States, because I think we still haven't realized a lot of the benefits we're going to get from a free and open internet. You think of things like Khan Academy, lots of services out there that kids, adult learners, anyone can get on and sort of improve themselves and learn more. That's going to be restricted if net neutrality goes away because these will be tiered services that people just aren't going to pay for, and it's going to have a negative effect or not be able to realize the full positive effect it could if these were available.
Friends, countrymen, citizens, I urge you, do not listen to that person in your Facebook newsfeed complaining about net neutrality today. These rules from the FCC might not be perfect, they're not ideal, but they're not going to materially impact the way that you consume content on the internet. Internet service providers are not monopolies. In the majority of census blocks, people have a choice, and because of that, they do not have the market power to just throttle traffic you love. They can't take away your Netflix, take away your Facebook, take away your Google, without a severe backlash from consumers. So you have to realize that even without some kind of concrete net neutrality provision, things are not going to change a whole lot. And for proof of this, just look to before 2015, before these Obama-era rules were in place. Was your internet experience all that different then to how it is now? Instead, what you need to be thinking about are the side effects of increased regulation. It's going to make it harder for any new entrant to come into the ISP marketplace if they're regulated like a Title II telecommunications firm. And so these regulations actually, in the long run, are going to harm investment in the US, it's going to make our internet infrastructure worse, and it's going to worsen your experience. So don't worry about these FCC rules, they're going to be just fine.
Fellow citizens, we are at a turning point of the internet right now. Telecom companies are pouring hundreds of millions of dollars to lobby against net neutrality. They're not doing this because of some philosophical opposition to regulation. They're doing this so they can make more money. And they want to make that money by charging you more. And they're going to do this, and they're going to prevent competition among startups, among innovation, and the next Google, the next Facebook, the next Snapchat, they're going to die on the vine when they can't get their traffic to customers like you. So if you enjoy this show, if you enjoy the internet you have today, please support the net neutrality provisions that already exist, and let's keep the internet free and open as it's always been.
Also subscribe to Random Talkers on YouTube. Thank you for watching.